Hey y'all, I'm Dan, and this is Kinfolk, Stories of Community and Connection. This is a special bonus episode where I'm chatting with Clara Lehmann, president of the Helvetia Restoration and Development Organization. Clara shares the rich history of Helvetia, West Virginia, and the vibrant tradition of Fasnacht, a celebration filled with masks, music, and the spirit of community. We dive into the roots of Fasnacht, the significance behind the mask, and how Helvetia keeps its cultural heritage alive. Let's dive in.
Hello.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Nice to meet you.
I'm doing great. Nice to meet you too.
And it's Daniel, correct? Or
Yes,
Dan?
it is.
Okay.
And it is Clara, right?
Yes, that's how you say it. Yep. Nice to meet you, Dan.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you too.
Well, let me ask you one question before we dive in. So, where are you actually? You're from somewhere here, correct? In West Virginia, or did I misspeak that? Misthink that?
No, you're exactly right. I was born and raised, I've always lived around Charleston.
Okay.
So always within like 10 to 15 minutes. So
Mhm.
born and raised here. So
Yeah, that's great. And then
we,
how did you hear about Fasnacht originally last year?
I saw it on someone had shared the event from your Facebook page, and that's how I
Yeah.
kind of saw it last year.
Great. I'm so thankful. I like hearing that because we're getting a lot of people from all over the country, and West Virginians have really embraced the festival. And that has made me feel really happy because it's for us, And so I want everyone to feel invited and welcome. But I know that the community really wants to make sure that West Virginians still come. So
Certainly, yeah.
very great.
So, real quick before we dive fully in,
Okay.
you are from, so someone corrected me before, Helvetia or Helvetia?
So people say it differently. I say Helvetia, and
Okay.
it's a Swiss word. It's actually Latin, and it's Helvetia in Switzerland, I think. And it's the Latin word for the symbol of the female symbol of Switzerland, and so she is on the coin for Switzerland. And so when the settlers came to our community, they decided we're not going to call ourselves Little Switzerland or Swiss community. Let's call ourselves Helvetia or Helvetia. Some locals say Helvetia. It has an E in it, so that's why I say Helvetia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That is super neat. I did not know any of that.
Yeah. It's a really, I mean, it's got a rich history, as do many really small rural communities who were, the immigrants came after the Civil War for our community. So it's fascinating, and it could be its own podcast one day. So
Were you born and raised like here in the state, like in Helvetia?
yes, I was born and raised here. Now, Helvetia doesn't have a hospital, and it wasn't a home birth. So in '82, I was born in Elkins, West Virginia, which is about 1 hour from Helvetia. And then I grew up here, went to school, kindergarten through 12th grades, in a little school called Pickens School, which is our local public school. And then I've lived here. I went away for college. I went to school in Minnesota. I lived in Chicago for a while. So I've traveled a bit and experienced different locations, and then came back here in 2012 to make this my permanent home again.
I know we've already had our introduction, but if you want to go ahead and share a bit about your role with the Helvetia Restoration and Development and what the mission of the group is.
Sure. My name is Clara Lehmann, and I am the president of the Helvetia Restoration and Development Organization, which is a nonprofit here in Helvetia, West Virginia. It was founded in 1969, so it's well over 50 years old, and community members came together and realized that there were archives, historically significant stories that needed to be maintained, as well as buildings and restoration that needed to continue throughout the village and throughout the region. So that was kind of the beginning of it, as well as holding on to cultural traditions. So eventually, the restoration began celebrating Fasnacht, which is our Lenten tradition, pre-Lenten tradition to scare away Old Man Winter. And I can give you more history on that shortly. But they decided to make it more of a public event rather than a private event in our own homes, and turn it into something that would generate some income for the community so that we can continue to do those restoration projects.
What are some key ways that the group, preserves Helvetia's culture, the history and traditions?
Yeah. Well, it's really neat. Like, for example, right now we're working on a signage project to give folks a way to learn about the community without having a guide. So we're writing about different buildings and making sure that they can identify the history of that building as well as learn more and then explore the village a little more and hopefully build a relationship with this community. So those are the types of projects we're working on. We also maintain an archive. And so we have photos and stories and videos from families throughout the communities that we serve. And again, we celebrate different traditions like Swiss national holiday. Given our ancestry is majority from Switzerland, we celebrate Swiss national holiday, which is August 1st. We also celebrate the foodways that our community offers, like raclette and cheese making and things like that. And there are certain things that we try to invest our time and energy into so that we continue to hold on to those traditions for our future youth.
Yeah. So, kind of with a lot of what you're saying there, is there a way that for anybody listening, or watching from the group, is there any way that they're able to, help or support those initiatives and projects?
Yeah, so I would highly recommend that if you're first having some experiences at some of our events is a really good way to get a taste. So at helvetiawv.com, you can see our community calendar, which is also maintained by our organization. And there's a newsletter that goes out maybe twice a year, maybe a little more depending on how much information we can share. And we identify different projects we're working on, if there are volunteer opportunities, or if you would like to make some kind of donation to our nonprofit, it would be tax exempt. And I think that mostly we want to make sure that people kind of reflect this in their own community. So we're trying to be an example so that maybe they can go home and start digging into their culture and history and archives and maintain the same. Because if it's not done by you, the keeper of these treasures, then it might not get done ever. So we would very happily share how we're doing that work and so that you can do it at home too.
That is so awesome. And that's kind of the main reason I started everything that I'm doing is, like you said, if we're not the ones to do it, who will?
And you don't know how accurate it will be. Like the people who are living it and maybe have a relationship to these stories are the ones that are going to do it with better intentions and perhaps more authentically. So I think it's wonderful that you're diving in as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So you did touch a little bit on Fasnacht's history.
Yes.
So if you could, what is the history of Fasnacht and how did this tradition make its way to Helvetia?
Yes, good question. So Fasnacht is German for fasting night. Fas meaning fast, Nacht meaning night. And the tradition is age old. And what I mean by that is if you were to just step back even a little bit, you'll realize this tradition is all around you. It's Mardi Gras, which is, Fat Tuesday, Mardi and Gras. It's also Carnival in Brazil. It is, of course, Fasnacht in Basel, Switzerland. And so this tradition is celebrated all over. Even in Venice, Italy, they celebrate Carnival.
Oh,
So
wow.
this is a very fascinating Lenten, as in Catholic tradition, that was maybe slightly appropriated from the pagan tradition for a winter festival or a winter to spring festival. So it's a very human, I want to call it a human tradition. It's something so that we can cleanse ourselves from maybe a harsh winter or from a period of time when we were without, and get ready for when there is more bountiful crops, more sunshine, however you want to interpret it. It can be spiritual, it can be social, but this tradition is not something that is just uniquely from Helvetia. It is originally its roots brought by our Swiss ancestry. Were bringing it from their Swiss communities. And so what they did was they celebrated in their homes privately here in Helvetia. There were only about, I would say, a couple hundred folks who immigrated here over the 50-year period that I'm thinking about, from 1869 to maybe 1969. And those folks decided that they wanted to celebrate in their homes. There was a small community, and they would get together. The children would run house to house to ask for Fasnachtskugli, rosettes, or Hoseblatts, which are like fatty fried dough that has sugar and it tastes delicious. And we still make those to this day. And so that was kind of, it's almost like it was like a little more like a Halloween. The kids would put on a mask, they'd go find the cookies, and then the adults would all have wine and play music and have a really great time dancing and things in their homes. And so eventually in the 60s of 1900s, we decided as a community, this tradition might be lost if we're not careful and cautious. We need to make sure we find ways to force ourselves to continue to celebrate it, but also make it maybe more meaningful and more traditional to the Swiss ancestry that it comes from. And so that's when we opened it to a more public sphere. At first, the first Fasnacht, there were only 2 people wearing a mask, and there were only about 15 to 20 participants. And to this day, now there are over 200 masks and 700 to 1,000 participants, give or take.
Wow.
So it's pretty phenomenal how the decision with intention has transformed the tradition, but also caused us to have maybe a little more of we've gained financial gains from it, but we've also learned more about our history and what it is, because some people even had forgotten what Fasnacht was in the 60s. So this is a lovely way to hold on to it.
That's awesome. That's really neat. And I didn't know a lot of what you talked about. So I'm learning a lot in this
Good.
conversation as well.
Yeah, awesome. And the thing that's cool is you could take your mask from Fasnacht Helvetia and go over to Switzerland and celebrate. That this is they celebrate with masks, and it's a little different in that they have troops, kind of like Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
Mhm.
So they have troops that play instruments, and then the troops all wear the same mask. And so it's kind of like these little, and then they parade. The event is kind of like have license to have a good time and be a little bit more risque, if you wish, or poke fun at politics or let loose a little bit. And that's kind of what even Mardi Gras to this day, everybody knows it's kind of a rowdy party, but that's kind of the vibe that you'll get from the Basel celebration, I believe.
So you mentioned masks.
Mm-hmm.
What is the significance of the masks with Fasnacht? And I'm not sure if I maybe heard this or read it somewhere, but were they originally carved like wooden, or can you just talk about the masks?
Yeah. So in Basel, Switzerland, many of them are carved in wood. And in Helvetia, our traditional masks are much more modest in that we are using the resources we have around us, and carving something out of wood is a lot more labor and it requires a lot more material. And so all of our families have always made masks from materials we have in our home or our neighbors might be able to give to us, and it's all recycled. We generally don't go out and buy a lot of new materials for our masks. That doesn't mean you can't. It just means that we're trying to be resourceful with what we have. And in tradition with this festival, it's kind of like you use the fat and you use the flour and things that you have in order to make those fatty desserts. And then you would go into Lent and you would be fasting for a bit afterwards. So just like that, we're doing the same with the materials we have, exhausting what we have, and then going into Lent and fasting, if that makes sense. There's kind of like a mirroring of the masks with the way that we're feeding ourselves and participating with nature, So mask making is traditional to Basel's tradition as well. However, and even in Venice, for example, they don masks and they wear more of a romantic, very like big gowns and floral masks and huge feathers and things like that. So that is tradition. But I do believe that what that comes from is there was a festival that was called Winterfest. And again, that was more of a pagan tradition. And they would I'm getting ahead of myself, but they would burn an effigy at these pagan festivals. And so we've married this mask making and Lenten tradition with this pagan festival, which is where you burn an effigy in order to welcome spring. And that's why we burn Old Man Winter. The masks also allow for people to hide their identity. And while you're hiding your identity, you've created your mask. So you're also exposing your soul or your feelings or something that you're struggling with in the creation and artistry of your mask, which is, I think, really fun. And that's why people love to come to Helvetia's Fasnacht, because each person has hopefully created their mask themselves. and it reflects something about what they're struggling with or what they are happy about. And then, so you're not really hiding your identity, you're really sharing maybe your soul. And that's really cool.
Hearing that kind of, I didn't know kind of that perspective on it. So reflecting on my mask from last year, I kind of, just a creative expression of sometimes how I feel that, I create, or how I feel that art is, like a representation or expression of, me. So it's just
It is. And it's so
super neat.
important. And I think that some people think they can't be an artist, they can't create a mask because they haven't practiced that skill, or they haven't like honed that ability. And I would urge you that, like, if you're in this mask making class, or if you are considering dabbling, that you can, and it does not have to be complex. It can be simple. Some people even get a piece of, cardboard and make a flat mask rather than going into something more 3D. So
Uh-huh.
it doesn't have to be complex. It's just a way to express and be a participant in this fun tradition.
I'm really glad you said that, because that's the main driving force. I did not go to school for art. I don't claim to be an artist. I'm someone who enjoys art and wants to share that joy with people. And that's kind of the main point of this, is to always tell everybody, like, just do it. Like, just because you enjoy doing something like art, like, it doesn't have to be good. Like, it's you creating. And I just think it's super neat, to hear you say that, because everyone always asks, oh, are you an artist? And I always say, no, I'm someone who enjoys art,
Mm-hmm.
versus something like that. So,
Yeah, I think art is human. And if you have if you have something before you that even if you're writing instead of painting, it's something that you should express with, because I think
mhm.
it satisfies something. And I think that it's important, and you don't have to share it with people, but Fasnacht is very sharing, in that there'll be the gamut. There'll be masks by children, masks that have been worked on for months, maybe even a year. There will be
Uh-huh.
masks that are thrown together right before you arrive. So it doesn't really matter. We just want you to participate, and you can come without a mask. That's another thing I want to say, is that some people are like, I don't feel like I want to do that. Or some people were even intimidated, that they thought maybe they weren't supposed to participate in the masks in the parade. I was like, oh no, you should, everyone's welcome. But some people just feel a little more comfortable watching and observing. And that's really fun too. It's a great people watching event.
For those who have not been to Helvetia, if you just want to give, like a imagination tour,
Yes.
walk us through the town of Helvetia, and then you can also talk about, how the day starts and how it progresses too.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in Helvetia, so it doesn't feel strange to me. But I do think that when you come to Helvetia, it's a bit of a brigadoon. And what I mean by that is it's like a lost town, or it feels that way, in the middle of nowhere. And yet it feels like time has not touched it in some ways. And it will appear to you that it is slightly run down, or rustic. And some of those elements we're holding on to. We want rustic, we want homemade, we want handmade. We don't want, as far as I'll speak for a few of our community folks, we don't want it to become commercialized. We want this to feel individual. And so
Certainly.
Helvetia, you'll come from, let's say you're coming from the north or south, you'll be on a winding road to get here. It will feel like forever if you haven't traveled old West Virginia country roads too much, but it will take an hour to get to our community from the nearest larger city. And you should expect that there may not be a gas station along the way. There will not be cell service. And it is rich as far as huge timbers and beautiful clean rivers. And in the winter, of course, it will maybe snowy and the leaves will be off, and it will look a little less rich as far as the greenery. So I would recommend coming back in the spring and summer as well. But as you come into Helvetia, you'll notice some of the architecture reflects some of the Swiss identity, or architecture. It's not one to one, but it has an homage to it. Some of the homes have high peaked roofs. There's lattice work that's similar to Switzerland, and in the summer there are flowers that are very similar. And then we fly Swiss flags and things like that. The cantons of the Swiss states are on many of the homes to reflect the ancestry of where each person may have come from. And so
Wow.
I think that that's one thing you'll really enjoy. And again, this community is probably 50 to 70 people at most. It's very small. And so I want to urge you to be cautious of the fact that you'll be coming into a community where there aren't a lot of people. There isn't a huge infrastructure, and many of our businesses are tiny. And then Fasnacht, for example, is completely volunteer driven. So you're getting an experience that's like a family experience. You're almost being welcomed into a community as if you're our cousin or sister or brother. So I think that that's one way to approach it. And then you'll come in hopefully with an open heart and mind. Now, for Fasnacht on the day, the village is going to be very packed. We normally only have, again, like a few families here, a few vehicles. You're going to see a lot of vehicles. It's going to be hard to park. And we're trying to find out some solutions for parking and things like that. But it'll be a street parking, and then you'll have to walk maybe a distance if you come later in the day. This year, we're celebrating from 12 p.m. until 10 p.m. We extended our hours so that you can enjoy some of the craft vendors longer, also participate in some of the jam session or the music that will be playing throughout the day. And also there will be 2 tours of the community, which are first come, first serve. Those are listed on our website, which I can share with you, Dan, later.
Yes.
And also you can participate in what we're calling, it's kind of like a Lenten discussion, but it's really a Fasnacht discussion to learn more about the food that we make and why. Some of what you and I have talked about today will be discussed, like mask making and the history of Fasnacht, and from the perspective of at least 3 local individuals. And the panel will be moderated by Jenny Williams, who is the West Virginia folk life. She's the folklorist, the state folklorist. So it's going to be really, really interesting and a good dynamic conversation. And then at 6 o'clock, roughly, everyone will be expected to bring and don their masks. If you want to wear your mask all day, you can, but you don't have to because can be uncomfortable. But you're expected to come to our historic square where we'll have music and an MC suggesting that you walk in a circle and you parade. And your masks are judged by 3 local judges that we've selected. And they will hand out a total of, I believe, 25 to children and 25 to adults of our handmade Swiss flags. And just because you don't win doesn't mean that your mask is not fantastic. Honestly, we limit it to 25 for kids and 25 for adults. And these are standout masks that appear to be homemade and have a perspective that will probably get those flags. After the judging of the masks, we all parade with Old Man Winter. He has been hanging in the gazebo, waiting for us to let him have his demise. And we cut him down from the gazebo and carry him to our bonfire near the community hall. And then we burn Old Man Winter. And then afterwards, from 7 to 10 is a Appalachian square dance with some traditional tunes that are Swiss as well. So there'll be polkas and schottisches and waltzes as well as square dances. And then there'll be food throughout the community. We have a lovely Swiss-German restaurant in the community called the Hütte. It's first come, first serve. And then there'll be food vendors and a little store. And it's just a really sweet tradition. And I've been doing it since I was a child, and it's grown, yes, but the intention and the feeling that it has are the same, and that it holds you, and it's a lot of good music and food and just play. So I think that you will very much love it. And our website has the schedule, and we're trying to update people with what vendors will be there and things like that from our Facebook event page as well.
That is so awesome. I'm so excited for this year. I mean, from attending last year, the food is amazing. I did the tour of the town. It was great. Just everything was just so, like, the community has just welcomed you in, and you just feel like you belong there. And that was one of my favorite parts of, being there. Like, I'm just excited. Short.
It is nice. I feel like it's a happy event. It's a family friendly event. And I think that you can have a really great time and let your hair down, or you can observe and reflect. There's something for everybody, I believe. And if you're a musician, bring your instruments. Let's jam together. Or your voice, you can sing. We would love to hear you sing. And that will be inside the Star Band Hall. We'll have a band that will play for a little bit in the Star Band Hall, but in the Star Band Hall, we'll also offer, an opportunity for others to play music together too. So it's a good time.
Certainly. Yeah, it really is.
Well, thank you. This was awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Kinfolk. stories of community and connection. Clara's passion for preserving Helvetia's history and the traditions of Fasnacht is a reminder of how powerful community and cultural heritage can be. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and rate the show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also connect with me and join the community on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Do you have a small Appalachian business or know someone who would love to share their story? Send me an email at kinfolkpodcastconnect@gmail.com. Show notes, including how to connect with the Helvetia Restoration and Development Organization, and links to Fasnacht can be found in the description and on Instagram. Till next time, keep exploring, stay kind, and don't be a stranger.